I'm the proxy for David Pierce. I know you've all enjoyed giving David a send-off for this great retirement tour, not unlike David Ortiz's retirement tour from one ballpark to another, so thank you for that. Today, we have a brief meeting primarily to go over the Tautog tagging reports and the plans for each jurisdiction to implement. First, the approval of the agenda. Is there any requested change to today's agenda? Seeing none, it's considered approved. Second, the proceedings from the August 2019. Are there any requested changes to the minutes of that meeting? Seeing none, we'll consider those approved. Next, is there anyone who would like to speak to the board on any items not on the agenda? I don't think anyone has signed up, so I'm assuming no. All right, let's get into the meat of the discussion today. It's a progress report on the commercial harvest tagging program with a possible action. And I'll turn it over to Kirby.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I have a brief presentation for you all today, just give a little bit of background, an update on the tag orders, an update on state implementation based on what the states have responded back, and after those 2 points, this board can consider management action if they think it's necessary. So in terms of background, as you guys are all very much aware, in October of last year, the board postponed implementation of the tagging program until January 1, 2020. Over the last year, there was an effort to pull together some draft implementation guidelines, which this board discussed at the last board meeting in August. Following that August meeting, there was a request for states to indicate whether they could implement the tagging program by January of 2020, as well as outline how many tags and how many tag applicators were needed in order to prosecute this tagging program next year. So, an update on the tag orders. I want to say first thank you to all the states to getting that information to staff in September. It was very helpful. We've been working with National Tag and Band over the last month and a half to try to finalize those orders and get them completed. They were placed earlier this month and are currently being processed. We're anticipating that the tags and applicators will be delivered to the states by the end of November or the beginning of December. And if anything changes on that front, we will let you guys know. I'm not sure if any of you had seen up until now what these tags will look like, and I thought it would be helpful for this board to better understand what the tags on the fish would look like in 2020. So this is an example that we have been working with National Band and Tag. As you can see at the top, on the far left, it has the year. Underneath the year, we have the state abbreviation. And then we have, on this slide, it's one of the initial prototypes where we had 5 digits in addition to an alphanumeric beginning indicator. What we've decided to do is drop one of these digits, so you have 4 numbers in addition to a letter. And the combination of letters through the entire alphabet and those 4 digits can get up to approximately 260,000 unique tag IDs for a state in a given year. So, looking at this image on the screen right now, just imagine it with that scrunched 4 removed. That's what the tag will look like next year. And the one that you should be receiving, as I said, hopefully in about a month's time. In terms of the state implementation of this program, as we requested following the August meeting, states got back to us and outlined what their plan is for 2020. And a number of states are going through the process right now of implementing those regulations so that starting January 1, their regulations reflect the tagging program that the state will implement. A few states, though, will not be implementing the program as of January 1. That is Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, and Maryland. In some instances, these states aren't able to get the tagging program implemented by January 1 due to the timing of when their commercial fishery begins. For Connecticut and New York, it's been communicated to staff that this alternative date is to reflect the end of one commercial fishing season and implementing it at the beginning of their fishing season in 2020. For other states, it's due to challenges in terms of implementing these regulations because they don't currently either have the rulemaking process to allow them to do it, or challenges in terms of identifying participants in the fishery and implementing this new program. That's for New Jersey and Maryland. Now, outside of the management unit, which is Massachusetts through Virginia, the states of Pennsylvania and North Carolina were also of interest to this board in terms of the tagging program. Pennsylvania has a commercial fish market in which Tautog, are sold live. And they have been going through a process to determine if they'd be able to enforce the tagging requirements that you all are implementing next year. I have not received word back yet from Pennsylvania that they intend to enforce that tag requirement in their fish markets. The other state is North Carolina. They have low levels of landings over the last few years. In most years, their landings have been at most 100 pounds. And due to the low level of landings, they've decided to not implement the tagging program. And again, they are not a part of the management unit and are therefore not required to do so. But in speaking with the North Carolina commissioners, they have indicated that they will communicate to their fishermen that this will present challenges for those fish that are caught and landed in North Carolina if they are hoping to sell them out of state to those states that have implemented the tagging program. So, for the board's consideration today, based on this update, if there is interest in specifying any additional requirements for the 2020 tagging program, you can do so. But as I said before, there's no action that's required as of now. So with that, I'll take any questions. Thank you.
Tom Fody.
I have two. One is, does North Carolina get they're not sitting at the table. It's just North Carolina get an influx of Tautog from other states to come in for their live market. And in Pennsylvania, we've always had a problem also with striped bass because there's no paperwork trail that goes there, and we know the fish that are legally poached that wind up in the Pennsylvania market when it comes to striped bass. I know it's for Tautog the same thing. So we're looking at if they come from our markets, are they going to basically be required to be carrying the tag? Otherwise, it winds up any fish in North Carolina or Pennsylvania becomes open season or where you can ship fish that are legally caught and creates a market that might not have been there before.
Thank you for the question, Tom. I am probably not the best person to speak to North Carolina's commercial fishery, but I will say that we do have in the room Chris Patsavage, Commissioner from North Carolina, and he may be able to speak to some of your questions about how the Tautog market in North Carolina currently is, and if there's any concerns about changes in that market demand.
Thank you, Kirby. Yeah, in terms of having the feedback, in terms of requiring the fishermen to tag Tautog in North Carolina, as Kirby mentioned, the landings are really low. They're scattered over multiple dealers, multiple fishermen, multiple counties. So trying to identify the fishermen and how many tags we need would be a challenge. And as Kirby mentioned, we're going to communicate with the dealers and fishermen that any Tautog landed commercially in North Carolina can't get shipped north. They're going to have to go somewhere else. Now, to Tom Fode's question about the live fish markets in North Carolina, or any fish markets that might purchase Tautog from northern states, we haven't discussed that, but we can touch base with ASMFC staff as far as just what our Marine Patrol and other inspectors can do as far as ensuring that we don't see an influx of untagged Tautog being sold in our state. In other words, the ones coming from the northern states should have tags from those states. But we can follow up with you in the coming weeks about that question. Thanks.
John Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for the presentation, Kirby. I had a question about the tag applicators. Because Delaware has the possession limit for commercial fisheries, the same as the recreational, and we have a bunch of commercial hook and line fishermen, when we did the sign-up, we had a bunch of people sign up because even though they've never targeted tog in the past, they didn't want to be left out. So we figured what we do is we can supply tags to them, but we're not buying the applicators. We're telling the fishermen if they want to participate, it's up to them to buy the applicator. But looking at the tag itself, I'm just wondering, can it be effectively used? I think you've said, Kirby, that pliers probably wouldn't work on this, but is it one of those things where we should require everybody in the fishery to get the actual applicator? Or, I mean, because if we're silent on that, I'm sure some will get the tags and just try to use pliers regardless.
Yeah, thanks for the question, John. So, it's the pleasure of the board on what you all want to do in terms of requiring what gear to purchase, but I will say that, based on our communication with National Band and Tag and their development of this tag, they have an applicator that is specific to helping get this tag onto the fish. And so it is, from our understanding, the best method to putting the tag on the fish. Trying other ways may create a situation where you break the tag or it doesn't click and actually hold on the fish, and then that can create problems, obviously, in terms of a tag getting off when the fish is in the market. So those are just things to consider. As you and I know, we've communicated back and forth on getting a link available that we would circulate to this board, so that in other instances where states are not planning to purchase applicators for their fishermen but would like to have them purchase it through National Band and Tag, there will be a link that they can go to that outlines what the specifications are, how much that costs, and we would make that available to you all soon.
John, if I could comment, our staff helped field test the tag and the applicators, and we had another question earlier in the week about the fact that the tag appears to be bigger than what was first tested. What we discovered was the smaller tag worked fairly well, but the smaller tag applicator was made of materials that would not have held up in the elements. It was the larger tag and the larger tag applicator specifically the larger tag applicator that was made of aluminum and is a stronger tool and wouldn't hold up to salt water. Furthermore, this larger tag does allow more information in terms of the smaller fonts and more characters. So that's why the larger tag was chosen. From my own experience, I've used the applicator, and it works well. It's a little tricky. You have to practice a little bit, but I couldn't imagine using an off-the-shelf set of pliers to do this. I think it would just fly out of the tool. The way this works, you sort of snap it in and then you close it. It's a well-designed tool for its use.
Thanks, Dan. So it sounds like even we wouldn't really have to require, we could just pretty much state in the letter that the only way to really fasten these tags is to use the applicator.
The only way to do it effectively, we recommend, and I think the applicator costs like $25. Yeah. Any other questions on this? Jay, back to me.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Kirby, I was wondering a little bit about Pennsylvania. So the North Carolina piece of this, I guess, gives me less concern, but Pennsylvania is kind of in that, portions of it are in that kind of metro area there, and I have concern about Tautog ending up in their markets without tags, and so you had it up there. I didn't quite. It didn't sink in. Do they have a rule that won't allow them? So they've not determined that yet. And I guess the comment that I will make is I think that's really important. I'm not asking them to tag Tautog or any of that, but a rule requiring Tautog to have tags in their markets I think is critical to make this program work.
Jay, would you like to make maybe a consensus recommendation or a motion that this board request Pennsylvania adopt the requirements of the tagging for fish in commerce to bear tags as opposed to the issuance of tags to commercial fishermen?
Yeah, I hadn't thought about it up until the moment I read the state report and the material, so I hesitate to get that official yet. Maybe we could talk with the folks from Pennsylvania first, and maybe it would help them if we did something like that, but I just don't want to go there yet.
Bob Beal, would you like to comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, since Pennsylvania representatives are not here, I'd suggest maybe bringing something forward to the policy board with the full commissions in the room, and just, as Jason was saying, have that discussion there, and we can let them know ahead of time so they're not blindsided at the policy board. And I'm not sure what provisions Pennsylvania, or how heavy of a lift it would be for Pennsylvania to adopt a rule that says, all Tautog commercially sold into Pennsylvania had to have tags in place and remain in place throughout the, chain of custody or something along those lines. So obviously they have those for striped bass and some others now, but how hard is it to add a species? I don't know, but the policy board is probably a good spot to do that.
Thank you. Kirby, something comes to mind for me as we go into the new year. Some states have open fisheries and some do not, and there may be some fish in commerce that are going to be untagged, and some of our states, mine included, are going to have codified regulations that mandate a tag. And so maybe at the end of the calendar year, staff could prepare a memo for all of the delegations and for the state director specifically to advise them on which states might still be putting untagged fish in commerce. So there could be advice given to law enforcement within those states to go easy or not not enforce that rule until we get a universal standard. It sounds like that may be either April or July. So just something to think about, that as we incrementally, each of us comes forward with these rules on our own schedule, we have the interstate commerce issues that we need to accommodate. Any thoughts on that? All right, great idea, Dan. So anything else?
You got it, Jay.
Oh, sorry, Jay.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. So great idea. And kind of along with that, I was wondering, again, a question for Kirby. So we've got, I think there's a hard date in the FMP. And so we've got some states that are a little bit behind. Are we just going to rely on the PRTs to say, yeah, they weren't in January 1, but they were in before the fishery started, so they're okay? Is that kind of the process we're doing, or do we need to do something more deliberative than that?
Well, I mean, again, it's the pleasure of this board on what action you want to take. As I outlined, not all states are going to have this implemented by January 1, which was the motion that was passed by the board. In a number of those instances, it's a state is trying to implement the regs before their season starts, but there are some states that are implementing it either mid-year or not quite lining up with the beginning of their season. And so obviously it's been noted there's a number of challenges in implementing this new program, and whether the board wants to consider that in light of how the motion was crafted and passed before, it's at your guys' discretion.
Jay, go ahead.
So I would be more inclined to keep it as currently constructed, just to kind of keep the pressure on it, rather not. So this is our second thing today that we've kind of delayed once, and we're on our potentially second round of delays. And so I think it makes sense to keep the existing January 1 date on there with some leniency from the board, when it comes to to the review for compliance. So that would be my preference, to not do anything at this point.
All right. Raymond?
Yeah, a question, Dan. You brought up the ICC. So moving forward with this FMP, we understand North Carolina, 100 pounds of fish. I don't know how many fish that is in units. But with Pennsylvania, when you start talking about the ICC, so buyers in New York will be able to ship to Pennsylvania. How would those fish in Pennsylvania, if they're not tagged, be sold in all the states that are comprised in the FMP? So how could they possibly ship fish out of the state of Pennsylvania to a state that is part of the FMP tagging fish?
Good question, Ray. I guess the first question is, how would those fish get into Pennsylvania? Because all the participating states are going to have a tagging requirement, so they would already have violated their in-state rules. Like if they came into Massachusetts and were shipped to Philly, you'd already have a violation in Massachusetts for having untagged fish. So I think we just want to shore up the Pennsylvania problem by just having them adopt a rule that says all Tautog for sale must bear a tag consistent with the interstate plan. But I think as long as every state has its rule about harvest, then there's an opportunity to constrain that.
Thank you.
All right. Anything else? Okay.
I'm not hearing any action.
No.
So,
all right, is there any other business to come before the board today? Seeing none, the board is adjourned. Thank you.
Knowing that we will probably have an exciting Menhaden meeting, we are going to start that meeting early. We will start it at 1 p.m. We'll put it up on the web so folks know, and we will see you back here at 1.